Hey guys, so this is Zan Dean here, and I have a business called Shakti Visions. I work with aspects of the soul, connecting people to self-love and really who they really are on soul level. I also teach a style of yoga called Buddha Yoga, which works on activating Kundalini energy, self-empowerment, and flexibility, mind, body, spirit. So I would feel called to create this video today to talk a little bit about the difference between spirituality and spiritual practices. So we see a lot, and kind of frankly, in my opinion, all too frequently, people essentially pointing the finger and creating a hierarchy and mixing up spiritual practice with spirituality. So I just thought I would clear up some of that today in this video. And my first talking point really is that humans are naturally spiritual. We are, you hear it all the time, we are souls, we are spirits having a human experience, and in that regard, we're all equal. We're all equally spiritual. We are all equal. All of our souls are equal, created equally, and we're all in the same boat. We're on earth together. We are spiritual beings with souls, and we are navigating constantly the third dimensional, complicated and dynamic human experience. So there are lots of things going on all the time in the human experience. And in that way, as equal spiritual beings, no one can actually be more spiritual than anybody else. In terms of just the very heart of spirituality and what it is to be a soul communicating on the third dimension, there's just no hierarchy there. There is spirit enacting itself in human form. And in that way, no one can be more spiritual than anybody else. However, it is really different, the idea of spiritual practice. So, spiritual practices have a variety of outlets, and truly the practices are completely unique to the individual, because some souls are built to experience things through their personal integrity in unique ways. So something that feels spiritual to someone else is going to feel totally not spiritual to somebody else. And that is the essence of a spiritual practice. That's why we have so many different spiritual practices, and why having a variety of spiritual practices is natural and perfect in its own way, because everyone wants to experience themselves differently, unique to their individual soul and their individual integrity. So spiritual practices really actually have nothing to do with the spirituality of your true self and soul, but sharing them is, really beautiful and important work. So that's why you see so many people as spiritual coaches and light workers, because they're sharing their spiritual practices to, gain awareness and consciousness over the fact that we all are inherently spiritual. However, I do feel, even though it is perfect and it is fine, exactly as it is, and I really don't, judge anyone for, creating and the spiritual practice that they live, as well as sharing it with others. That's a beautiful thing, and it's very important work. There can be a ego involved, and ego is a perfectly natural thing and spiritual in its own way. As humans, that's how we create ourselves in safe space and create survival, and also gain confidence to move through the world and do and create what we desire. So the bottom line is each individual spiritual practice is an individual choice, and it's really none of anyone else's business. What you choose to do to feel yourself as a spiritual being and explore your consciousness is completely private and completely unique to you. And I would just, I strive to show that, everyone can feel as though they are spiritual without really needing to do any type of thing other than be human and express yourself as you are. And that comes down to, some people choose to push others down so that they feel more spiritual. And truly that act of, creating a hierarchy of spiritual practices is really a delusion of the ego. It's still okay, it's still perfectly spiritual to be an ego and to point fingers and to create a hierarchy. Like us as humans, we tend to do all kinds of things that aren't necessarily healthy or positive or shining light, and that's fine. Throwing shade, do it. Whatever is an accurate expression of what you need to do and create in your reality. But the bottom line is that pushing others down so that you feel more spiritual is not going to make you more spiritual, and because you still are equally as spiritual as everyone else. So this comes down to the fact that people really are confusing inherent spirituality with spiritual practices and creating a hierarchy in that way. So this is really irrelevant to actual spirituality. Your spirit, you can do whatever spiritual practices you like to, change your consciousness and create awareness for yourself and, grow yourself, but it really does not actually in any way affect the natural spirituality of your soul having a human experience. That's something that you actually can't change because that's just the nature of how we show up here on earth as souls, as inhabiting these bodies, and there's no way to affect that. So people who have zero spiritual practices and are really just doing their 9 to 5 and doing whatever, they actually are equally as spiritual as someone who chooses to go on a shamanic path or smudge themselves or play with crystals or be vegan. All of those things are choices that person is choosing to create for themselves to explore their personal spiritual practice, but it actually shows zero reflection of the actual spirit showing up in this body, which is equal upon all people on earth. That's what we're doing here. So that said, there's one more kind of aspect to this, and I see a lot of people talking about, when I had my spiritual awakening, like I began to have these thoughts and develop a spiritual practice. And, I wanted to create these sensations, or I want to, continue having these awakenings and that sort of thing. And I think it's important to recognize that, getting attached to spiritual sensations or experience is greatly irrelevant to actual spirituality. It's in fact, it focuses too much on relying on experience to feel spiritual, and it deludes us into the idea that we're not always having a spiritual experience. End of discussion. Being here is spiritual, and having an awakening and having sensations and having an experience may clue you into that, but focusing too much on that actually can detract from the experience of recognizing that, no matter what you do here on earth, you are a spiritual being, you are a soul incarnated into a human experience, and that is equal. And, it would be a shame to detract from acknowledging that everyday experience of being a human is naturally spiritual. So I just urge you not to get too focused on the sensations of awakening or what the spiritual practices guide you. I mean, by all means, have your spiritual practices, explore your consciousness, create yourself in the world as you want to see it. But I truly believe that, and my goal with this video is to shine light on the relative and perfectly acceptable, however toxic, situation that a lot of people who are claiming to be spiritual coaches and guiding others, which I'm sure they are, but they put it into a hierarchy and put their spiritual practice above someone else's, and inherently that is it's a disempowering experience, and it's not necessary. And if you feel as though, someone is putting your spiritual practice or your way of expressing yourself as a human naturally, spiritually, below theirs, I think it's an important moment to acknowledge that that's just not accurate. And I really, my bottom line of this video is to really share with you that you are perfect and you are spiritual, and nothing anyone else does, says, or practices that they share with you really can take that away. So I really just felt called to share this, and I hope you guys receive it with open heart and open love, and know that I acknowledge your spirituality, whatever way it shows up as human in this human experience. And whether you spend your time watching TV and doing your 9 to 5 and taking care of your kids, all of those things are equally as spiritual as smudging and crystals and tarot and soul work and veganism and all of those things. Nothing can take away from you being a spiritual being, period. So I hope you have a beautiful day. Thank you for being here and watching this.